Ever get that feeling like you're drowning in information, just bombarded with news and opinions and everything? And what you really want, what you really need, is just a clear, simple way to understand what actually matters.
Yeah, I know that feeling. Information overload, it's everywhere.
That's what we try to do here with the deep dive. Take the stuff you're curious about and boil it down. Extract the core insights, help you really get it.
Not just summarize it, right?
Exactly. We're going for deeper understanding, like connect the dots, see the patterns, the bigger picture.
So you can walk away feeling like, okay, I actually understand this now.
Precisely. And today we're diving into some material you sent us, which is super interesting.
Buckle up.
It's a YouTube transcript, actually, from the Courtenay Turner podcast.
Oh, I've seen some of her stuff. Interesting channel.
Yeah. This specific presentation is titled Game B Creating the Noosphere, Courtenay's Presentation to Rising Tide Foundation. It's a mouthful.
Game B, Noosphere. Definitely sounds like we're heading into some theoretical territory.
We are. And the core question here, the one that really grabbed our attention, and probably yours too, is this exploration of Game B.
Right. Trying to unpack what this whole Game B thing is all about.
Yeah. And the presenter frames it as this idea emerging from what she calls a cybernetics cult.
Okay, so right off the bat, we've got cybernetics and cults. This is going to be good.
And to make it even more interesting, there are these hints of transhumanist leanings within this movement. So we're talking about potentially reshaping society on a pretty fundamental level.
Ambitious, to say the least.
And knowing you and how much you love getting to the heart of complex topics, seeing all the angles and, having those aha moments.
Oh, I live for those. The brain fireworks.
Exactly. We thought, okay, this is the perfect deep dive. We got to unpack this Game B thing for you, give you that solid understanding without you having to wade through hours of content.
Shortcut to enlightenment. I'm in.
So let's start with the basics. What is Game B, and where did this idea even come from?
Well, according to the transcript, the main guy, the architect of Game B, is this guy named Jim Rutt.
Jim Rutt. Okay. And what's his deal? What's his background?
His background is actually super relevant. He was the chairman of the Santa Fe Institute.
Now, remind me, what is the Santa Fe Institute all about?
It's a pretty big deal in the world of, complexity theory and systems thinking. They study how complex systems work, like economies, ecosystems, societies.
So this Jim Rutt, he's a systems guy. That's interesting.
Right. And it kind of lends credence to the presenter's whole cybernetics cult thing. It's not just some random dude off the street. This is someone who spent his career thinking about complex systems.
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection.
And there's another piece to this puzzle. Before Game B, Rutt started this political party, the Emancipation Party, back in 2011.
A political party, huh? So Game B has political roots.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It seems like the party itself didn't really take off.
What happened?
Well, Rutt noticed something interesting. He said millennials, while they liked a lot of the party's ideas, especially universal basic income, they weren't that into the whole political party structure.
So they like the ideas, but not the political machine.
Exactly. They weren't keen on the traditional way of doing politics. And this kind of failure to translate ideas into political action seems to have been the breeding ground for Game B.
Interesting. So we've got a systems thinker who starts a political party that flops. And from those ashes rises Game B.
It's more nuanced than that, but yeah, that's a decent starting point. And it wasn't just him, by the way. The transcript mentions some other big names involved in those early Game B discussions.
Oh, yeah? Like who?
Thor Mueller, for one,
Oh.
and Brett Weinstein.
Wait, Weinstein as in Dot from the intellectual dark web.
The one and only.
Wow, okay. So we're talking about some pretty unorthodox thinkers right from the beginning.
Definitely. And that connection to the IDW is something to keep in mind. It speaks to a certain intellectual lineage. Like maybe there were certain concerns they all shared that led them down this path of exploring alternatives.
And they didn't all necessarily agree on everything, right? Weren't there some internal debates?
Oh, yeah, definitely. The presenter talks about some of those early disagreements. She describes the range of perspectives as from woo spiritual stuff to more hardcore scientific approaches.
So like crystals versus equations.
Something like that. But she also points out that eventually, over time, these different threads found a way to kind of weave together. They blended those tech and science ideas with more philosophical, even spiritual concepts.
A melting pot of ideas. That's kind of fascinating.
Yeah.
So we've got these roots in systems thinking, a failed political party, and intellectual dark web figures. Now, what are the actual core tenets of Game B? Like, what's the big idea?
Okay, so at the heart of it, Game B folks argue that the way our society operates now, what they call Game A, is basically broken.
Broken.
They say it's rivalrous and unsustainable, like it's all about competition and it's not going to last. They claim this has been the dominant model for like the past 10,000 years of human history.
Wow, 10,000 years. That's a pretty bold statement.
And they say Game A is now facing what they call a meta crisis.
Meta crisis.
Amazing.
Like a crisis on steroids.
Huh. Sort of. It's more like a cluster of interconnected crises, like ecological problems, political dysfunction, social breakdown, messed up education systems, identity crises, you name it.
So basically everything is going wrong. That's a pretty bleak outlook.
They're not exactly optimistic about the current state of affairs, that's for sure. But here's where Game B comes in. They present it as a potential solution, a way out of this mess. They call it a brighter future, a new social operating system.
Okay, so if Game A is all about competition, what's Game B about?
Collaboration, cooperation. They want to shift from a me versus you mentality to a we mentality. It's all about working together for the collective good.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Big time. And they have a whole vocabulary to go with it. The transcript highlights these buzzwords that keep popping up. Decentralized, egalitarian, collaboration, cooperation, resilience, sustainability, anti-fragile, metastability, well-being economy, regenerative.
It's like a whole new language.
It is. And those words paint a pretty clear picture of what they're aiming for. A society that's distributed, fair, focused on working together, and able to not just bounce back from challenges, but actually become stronger because of them.
So how do they plan to actually make this happen? They're just going to snap their fingers and transform society.
No, of course not. They have this idea of islands of coherence.
Islands of coherence. Sounds pretty abstract.
It is a bit, yeah. It comes from this quote by Ilya Prigozhin about systems far from equilibrium. The basic idea is to create these small pockets within the existing Game A system that embody Game B principles.
So little Game B communities within the larger Game A world.
Exactly. And the idea is that these islands will be so attractive, so successful, that they'll start to pull the whole system in their direction, like a great attractor for a new way of living.
Interesting strategy. But let's be real. It all sounds a bit idealistic.
Huh.
And the transcript does bring up some concerns and criticisms of Game B. What are some of the potential downsides?
Yeah, not everyone's buying into the hype. One big concern is about the whole decentralization thing. They talk a big game about distributed systems, but critics worry that you could still have exclusion within Game B communities.
Like, even if it's decentralized, it might not be inclusive.
That's the worry. If acceptance is based on certain beliefs or being part of a certain clique, it could just end up recreating existing forms of social exclusion, just with different rules.
That's a valid point. It's not enough to just decentralize. You got to make sure it's open and accessible to everyone.
What about control? Like, even if it's decentralized, is there a potential for new forms of control to emerge? That's another big worry. The transcript talks about the potential for control mechanisms arising through things like public-private partnerships and these things called network states.
Network states, what are those?
It's a concept that's been getting some attention lately, especially from people like Balaji Srinivasan, the CTO of Coinbase. And even Peter Thiel, the venture capitalist, has shown interest in the idea.
So big names are taking this seriously. What's the basic idea behind a network state?
Basically, it's like this. Imagine a future where the old nation states, based on geography, kind of dissolve. And instead, you have these ideological states united by shared beliefs and values, all connected through technology.
So instead of physical borders, you have these digital borders.
Yeah, exactly. And a key part of this, according to the transcript, is the use of digital IDs and wallets. So you could imagine a situation where if you don't align with the dominant ideology of a particular network state, you could get locked out.
Locked out how?
Locked out of participating in certain aspects of life, like maybe you can't access certain services or you can't vote or who knows what else.
That's a bit unsettling. It's like a new kind of digital feudalism. You belong to the network state that aligns with your beliefs, or you're kind of out of luck.
Right, and that raises some serious questions about freedom and individual liberty in that kind of system.
For sure. And essentially, the transcript also points out this connection between the intellectual dark web and early Game B. Like there's this suggestion of a potential influence operation.
Yeah, it's a bit of a conspiracy theory, but the presenter lays out her case. She points out that a lot of the people who became famous as part of the IDW were also early advocates for Game B, and this all happened right around the time they were gaining more public attention.
So her theory is that the IDW was, in part, a way to introduce and popularize Game B ideas.
Exactly. Now, she's not necessarily saying it was malicious or anything, but she's raising the question of how these ideas get spread and whether there was a deliberate effort to shape the conversation.
It makes you think, like, who's pushing these ideas and why?
For sure. It's worth considering. Okay, so we've talked about the vision, the potential pitfalls, the origins. Now let's talk about some of the big ideas behind Game B, the philosophical stuff. The transcript mentions this concept of the Noosphere. What is that all about?
Yeah, that one always throws me off.
So the Noosphere was this idea developed by this Jesuit priest and philosopher, Teilhard de Chardin.
A priest. Okay, now we're getting really out there.
Well, de Chardin was a pretty interesting guy. He saw evolution as this process that was leading towards greater and greater unity and consciousness. And the Noosphere, in his view, is like this layer of global consciousness, this interconnected network of human minds.
So like a kind of collective mind of humanity.
Yeah, something like that. And this idea of moving towards the Noosphere is a big part of Game B's vision. It fits with their emphasis on collaboration and shared knowledge.
Makes sense. What about the Age of Aquarius movement? How does that fit into all of this?
The presenter brings that up too. The Age of Aquarius was this whole movement that was popular in the 60s and 70s. It was all about shifting from a focus on individualism and competition to a more collective, cooperative way of being.
Peace, love, and understanding.
Exactly. And she suggests that Game B can be seen as a kind of modern-day reimagining of those Age of Aquarius ideals. But now it's all infused with the power of technology.
So it's like Age of Aquarius 2.0 powered by algorithms.
Something like that.
And there's that quote from Stuart Brand, the one about we are as gods.
Yeah, we are as gods, we might as well get good at it. Pretty bold statement.
Stuart Brand. We don't know that name from.
He was a big figure in the counterculture movement. He started the whole Earth catalog. And the presenter interprets him as representing this kind of Gnostic, cybernetic cult aspect within Game B.
Okay, now you've lost me. Gnostic cybernetic cult.
It's a mouthful, I know. But basically, it's this idea that humanity, or at least a certain segment of humanity, is evolving to this point where we have these godlike powers, and we need to figure out how to use them responsibly. And Brand's quote to her reflects that belief.
Okay, I kind of see what she's getting at. Like, we have all this technology, we can do all these amazing things, but we also have the potential to really screw things up.
Right, and that idea of a psychon class, like a group of highly evolved individuals who are leading the way, that also feeds into this whole Gnostic cybernetic cult thing. It's like they see themselves as the vanguard of this evolutionary leap.
And then there's this ambition to, like, rewrite the story of the universe. What's that about?
Yeah, that's a recurring theme. It echoes some of the stuff Jordan Peterson talks about with his Alliance for Responsible Citizenship. The idea is that the stories we tell ourselves about our place in the cosmos are outdated and need to be replaced with a new, more unifying, more constructive story.
So we're talking about a fundamental shift in how we see ourselves and our place in the universe.
Exactly, and that's a pretty ambitious goal. But here's the thing. Even though they're all about creating this new future, this Game B, they also have this somewhat paradoxical relationship with Game A.
Paradoxical how?
They don't advocate for a complete break from the current system.
They don't, but they just said it's broken.
Right. But they also recognize that the tools they need to build Game B, the technologies, the infrastructure, they're all products of Game A.
So they need to use the tools of the system they want to change.
Exactly. They call it parasitizing Game A. Like they're going to use the existing system to their advantage until they can create something better.
It's a bit like using the master's tools to dismantle the master's house, isn't it?
That's a good analogy. Okay, so we've talked about the philosophy, the vision. Now let's get into some of the concrete stuff, the projects and initiatives that are actually happening within the Game B world.
Yeah, let's talk specifics. What are they actually doing?
Well, the transcript mentions a bunch of different projects. One is called the ARC, which stands for Arts Disciplinary Research Center.
What's that all about?
It's focused on metamodernism, which is like, it's hard to explain.
Try me.
Think of it as this artistic and cultural approach that's trying to move beyond the cynicism of postmodernism.
Postmodernism being...
Like the idea that there's no objective truth.
Yeah.
Everything is relative. Everything is ironic. Metamodernism is trying to re-engage with grand narratives and sincerity, but in a way that's self-aware.
So it's not just throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Right. They want to reclaim some of the good stuff from modernism, but do it in a way that acknowledges the complexities of the postmodern world.
Got it. What else?
There's this group called Buddhist geeks.
Okay, that's an interesting combination.
Right. It's not what you'd typically expect, but they're all about exploring what comes after modernity, so it ties into that metamodernism thing. They see the current meta-crisis as a central challenge, and they're looking to Buddhist philosophy for insights.
So like finding solutions to modern problems in ancient wisdom.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And they talk a lot about the age of the network cosmotic human.
The what now?
It's basically their way of describing the current state of humanity, where we're all interconnected through technology and grappling with these big existential questions.
Right. Anything else?
The Civium Project gets a mention.
Now what's that?
That's Jordan Hall's baby. He's trying to redefine civilization.
Ambitious.
Yeah, he's not messing around.
All right.
And then there's the Monastic Academy.
A monastic academy. What is this, like a school for monks?
Kind of.
Yeah.
But it's more like a modern take on esoteric teachings.
Esoteric.
Yeah, like mystical, spiritual stuff. And they talk about praxis, which suggests they're focused on the practical application of these teachings, maybe in the context of building Game B communities.
Okay, so we've got art, Buddhism, civilization, and now mysticism. Game B is a real grab bag of ideas.
It is, for sure. And it's not just about high-level concepts. They're also thinking about practical stuff, like how to actually organize and govern these Game B communities.
So like alternative models of governance.
Exactly. One they highlight is called sociocracy for all. It's all about self-governance, making decisions based on consent rather than majority rule.
Consent-based decision-making.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty radical.
It is. The goal is to create these environments where everyone feels safe and heard, and to build groups that are what they call anti-fragile, meaning they don't just survive challenges, they actually get stronger because of them.
That's a cool concept.
Right. And they also mention other models like crowdracy and liquid democracy. So they're really exploring all sorts of different ways to structure these communities.
Wow, it's like a whole laboratory of social experimentation.
That's a good way to put it. And then there are these concepts like Tomorrowland and Togetherland.
Which sound like, I don't know, utopian communities or something.
Yeah, they're a bit vague. They could be actual places or just aspirational ideas, but the names definitely evoke a sense of hope and possibility.
So a whole ecosystem of projects and ideas, it's a lot to take in.
It is. And behind all these ideas, there's this really interesting cast of characters driving the movement.
Yeah, let's talk about some of these individuals. Jim Rutt, obviously, is a big one. But who else is really shaping Game B?
Well, we already mentioned Jordan Hall. He's the civilization redesigner. But it's worth pointing out that he's also a co-founder of this company called Qualia Life Sciences. They used to be called Neurohacker Collective.
Qualia Life Sciences, what do they do?
Nootropics, like brain-enhancing supplements.
So like smart drugs.
Basically. And they're very much into transhumanist ideas. They talk about their users as conscious creators who are trying to increase their lifespan and enhance their cognitive abilities.
That's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down.
For sure. But it's worth noting that connection to transhumanism. It fits with that whole cybernetics cult characterization.
Yeah, it definitely suggests a certain worldview. Okay, who else?
Daniel Schmokenberger is another major player. He's another co-founder of Qualia Life Sciences, and he founded the Civilization Research Institute. And then there's the Consilience Project.
Consilience.
Right.
As in bringing together different fields of knowledge.
Exactly. It's a transmedia project that's trying to create more understanding between different cultures and establish new shared values.
So like finding common ground.
Right. And the transcript points out this interesting detail. Apparently, the Consilience Project's logo has a connection to NACs.
NACs.
Natural asset companies.
Okay. And what are those?
It's this idea of valuing natural resources as financial assets, like putting a price tag on things like forests and rivers.
Interesting. So we've got this guy involved in brain enhancement, civilization redesign, and now this whole natural asset thing. It's quite a mix.
He's a busy guy. And then there's Tyson Yunkaporta.
Tyson Yunkaporta, that name rings a bell.
He's an Indigenous scholar, a senior research fellow at Deakin Research. He wrote a book called Right Story, Wrong Story.
Okay, yeah, I think I've heard of that. What's his connection to Game B?
He brings a really important Indigenous perspective to the conversation. He talks about moving away from industrialized society, reconnecting with traditional ways of knowing.
So a bit of a counterpoint to all the high-tech stuff.
Yeah, he's definitely grounding things in a different way. And he has a big role in that initiation to Game B film, which suggests they're actually trying to incorporate Indigenous wisdom into their thinking.
That's good to hear. Diversity of perspectives is always a good thing. Who else is on the list?
Nora Bateson.
Wait, Bateson, as in Gregory Bateson, the anthropologist.
Yeah, she's his daughter.
Wow. So she comes from this whole lineage of systems thinking.
Exactly. She's a member of the Club of Rome, and she runs the International Bateson Institute. She's carrying on her father's work on complex systems and this thing called warm data.
Warm data. What's that?
It's hard to explain in a nutshell, but it's basically a way of understanding information in a more holistic, interconnected way, taking into account the relationships and contexts.
So like not just looking at data in isolation, but seeing how it all fits together.
Right, exactly. And the transcript also mentions a bunch of other names. Zach Stein, Mark Dallin Kaplan, Alexander Beiner, Brett Weinstein, we already talked about him, Peter Wang, Forrest Landry.
Okay, so a whole constellation of thinkers and doers. What are these other folks all about?
Well, Zach Stein is a member of the Club of Rome and co-created this thing called cosmotic humanism, whatever that is. He's also involved in the Consilience Project, so he's connected to Schmokenberger in that whole values-building thing. Mark Allen Kaplan is all about art, media, technology, and consciousness, especially in the age of AI. Alexander Beiner co-founded Rebel Wisdom, which is this platform that's kind of adjacent to GameB. Brett Weinstein, we already talked about, the evolutionary biologist, IDW guy. Peter Wang founded Anaconda, which is a big deal in the data science world. They make tools for Python, which is a programming language that's super important for AI. And then there's Forrest Landry.
Forrest Landry. What's his story?
He's an interesting one. He's got this background in woodworking, but he's also developed large-scale software systems for intelligence and data warehousing for, like, the FBI, the TSA, DARPA, the Library of Congress. He's also the CEO of this company called Magic Flight.
Wow, so he's got connections to both the tech world and the government.
Seems like it. It suggests there might be some deeper connections there, maybe even within the military-industrial complex.
Intriguing. Okay, so a diverse group of people with a wide range of expertise. It's starting to feel like GameB is more than just an idea. It's like a whole movement, a network.
Absolutely. And the transcript goes into some detail about this film they made, The Initiation to GameB. What did you make of that discussion?
Well, they describe the film as having this protopian vision. What's that supposed to mean?
It means it's not quite utopian. Like, it's hopeful, but it acknowledges that things are kind of messed up right now.
So realistic optimism.
Yeah, something like that. And what the metaphors they use in the film is this idea of a parasite that represents, like, the game of malware in our mind.
Game of malware, like the way of thinking that keeps us stuck in the old system.
Exactly. And the panelists, including Jordan Hall, talked about the need for new kinds of storytelling. Stories that focus on reconciliation and systemic change, not just conflict. They even talked about using blockchain to create participative narratives.
Participative narratives. What's that?
I think they're talking about stories where the audience is actively involved in shaping the narrative, maybe through something like blockchain technology.
Interesting. So they're really thinking about how to change the stories we tell ourselves about the world.
Definitely. And there's this one part where a panelist talks about Trojan horsing GameB ideas into mainstream entertainment.
Trojan horsing, right? Like sneaking them in.
Yeah, basically. They even talk about pitching ideas to Disney.
So like planting the seeds of GameB in popular culture.
Exactly. And then Daniel Schmokenberger straight up says that GameB requires cultural social engineering.
Cultural social engineering. That sounds a bit, I don't know, manipulative.
Yeah, it does kind of raise some ethical questions, like how much are they trying to influence people's beliefs and values?
It's one thing to offer alternative ideas. It's another to try to engineer society.
Right. And they also mentioned NFTs associated with the film, so they're using those kinds of tools to build a community around GameB.
NFTs, of course. Okay, let's talk about the more practical side of things, the technology and the financial aspects of GameB. The transcript mentions the Emancipation Party's platform as a kind of precursor to some of these ideas. What were they proposing?
Well, they had this whole laundry list of proposals. They wanted free money for everyone through a social dividend, real transparency in financial transactions, like making everything publicly viewable, new corporate structures called BC corporations, a citizenship wage, which is basically UBI, of around $8,000 a year for everyone.
Okay, so some pretty radical ideas about how to structure the economy.
Yeah, definitely. They also wanted to fund intellectual property in the public domain through something they called open creation, and they were pushing for an end to the drug war, drug peace, and universal health care.
So a mix of economic, social, and political reforms. Ambitious stuff. And how does all that connect to the more developed ideas of Game B in terms of technology and finance?
Well, the transcript lays out some of the core principles that guide Game B's approach to technology and finance.
Like,
Decentralization is huge. They want to distribute power, get away from centralized control. They're also big on anti-rivalry, which means moving beyond competition and embracing collaboration.
they're like cooperation instead of competition.
Exactly. And of course, sustainability. They want systems that are regenerative, that restore the environment rather than depleting it.
Makes sense. What else?
The principle of emergence is important too, which means favoring bottom-up solutions, letting things evolve organically rather than trying to control everything from the top down. And then there's the whole Noosphere thing again, which emphasizes shared knowledge and transparency.
Okay, so these are like the guiding principles. What about specific technologies? Are there any technologies that they see as particularly important for building Game B?
Yeah, the transcript mentions a bunch. Holochain, for one.
Holochain, what's that?
It's kind of hard to explain, but it's basically a decentralized, agent-centric alternative to the traditional internet.
Okay, so not just using the existing internet.
Right. They see Holochain as a fundamentally different way of structuring the internet. More like a hollow web of interconnected data nodes.
Nodes, like individual points in a network.
Yeah. And the idea is that this kind of architecture would enable direct peer-to-peer interactions, decentralized forms of organization, and even the creation of community-specific digital currencies.
So it's like a whole new internet built from the ground up.
Exactly. They're not just tweaking the existing system. They're trying to create something entirely new.
Wow, that's ambitious. What else?
They also talk about NoMap, which is now called the S7 Foundation.
And what's their deal?
They're all about building a post-capitalist world. They're into things like degrowth, gift economies, and regenerative economics.
Degrowth, so like intentionally shrinking the economy.
Yeah, the idea is that endless economic growth is unsustainable, and we need to find ways to thrive within ecological limits. And then there's the new Bretton Woods project.
Bretton Woods, isn't that some kind of international financial agreement?
Yeah, it was the agreement that established the post-World War II financial system.
So what's the new Bretton Woods project about?
It's a group of Harvard students and alumni who are trying to create a stablecoin backed by Bitcoin.
A Bitcoin-backed stablecoin. That's interesting. So they're looking to cryptocurrencies as part of this new financial system.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the Game B folks are interested in blockchain and crypto as a way to create a more decentralized and equitable financial system.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about the origins of Game B, the core ideas, the concerns, the projects, the people, the technologies. As we wrap up this deep dive, what are your final thoughts? What's the big takeaway?
Well, I think what really stands out to me is the sheer scope of Game B. It's not just about tweaking a few things here and there.
Courtenay Turner's on the stage tonight, warning us with a chilling sight. Mad at the host so sharp, Canadian patriot guards the heart. Gamey looms a twisted plan, dystopia dressed as a promised land. Rising tide heard the sirens call, a system threatening one and all. Gaming is a lie, a tyrant's disguise. Courtenay sees through the web-free skies. Matt stands tall, the patriots cry. Humanity's soul, the tearing dry. Game is flawed, but this ain't right. Game these chains in a tech-filled night. Non-rivalrous, a hollow claim. A utopia fueling a darker game. Courtenay's voice cuts like a blade. Matt's exposing the masquerade. Synthwave scream as freedom shakes. Humanity's core is what's at stake. Gaming these a lie, a tyrant's disguise. Courtenay sees through the web-free skies. Matt stands tall, the patriots cry. Humanity's soul, they're tearing dry. Gaming these a lie, a tyrant's disguise. Courtenay sees through the web-free skies. Matt stands tall, the patriots cry. Humanity's soul, they're tearing dry. That game is flawed, but this ain't right. Pygmy's chains in a tech-filled night. Pygmy's chains in a tech-filled night. Pygmy's chains in a tech-filled night. Pygmy's fall, but this ain't run dry. Courtenay Turner, Matt Irene. Gaming's the threat, fight it yet.